I guess we should get started on this wrap-up conversation. I can kick it off. I had a lot of fun refereeing this game, and I think the main objective that we wanted to try, which was large blocks of troops with a different post-melee calculation, I think that went well enough that I think we're on to something with it. Thoughts, comments? Pass the microphone.
Yeah, I actually think I think it's the right way to play post melee. I think it is.
I am not sure how it went on the other side during the first battle, but during the first battle, you could do basically all the calculations beforehand and basically go, well, no matter how the combat's going to roll, we'll win if we charge in like this. And that felt a lot less the case here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt that it was a lot easier. I remember the first couple chainmail battles I did solo. Calculating it out, I had to have pencil and paper. Now, I might have made some math errors with this one, but at least I could keep track of this step is a pretty low number, second step, low number, third step, bigger number. It was able to be done, on the fly in your head.
Yeah.
You do what we do where it's super easy, like when the two armies are there, to just use a die to count the number, right? Like you got 2 more kills, here's my roll, here's the amount. Okay, you have this many extra dudes, here's your die. And then you do one step of math, right?
Yep, the multiplication.
That was really helpful then. Trying to do all 3 steps in your head, no. But if you use the dice on the table like you did, that's the way we do it. It's super quick. It's super, super quick.
Yeah, especially if there were more people in the room to make sure that the math was on. Like I noticed in even the last video, I said 6 and I said 7 and I put down 8 with the dice, just stupid little errors like that.
Yep.
I still wonder if the system is maybe too complex for what it tries to emulate, but I'm not sure.
It is a very wide time range, to cover the entire, basically Dark Ages through medieval.
Yeah.
Through even pike and shot, it is too much.
Especially like with counting. One thing I wonder about, and I'm not sure how it was on your end, but the casualty times the random D6 seems sort of inconsequential still to me, especially if you have like a heavy horse which is counting for 24 just on its own.
Yep. Yeah, that little bit of randomness is very small. It could make a difference, I guess, if you were right on the edge of one result versus another. But I think over the long term, it factors out.
I know that for myself, like I've actually ended up using. I think the evolution actually shows that everyone went to the excessive casualty type role, and I use that a lot more when I'm playing at the table at home than I do post melee morale. And honestly, I think that there's other mechanisms in that rule set that could handle the post melee with the 2d6 personally.
Yeah, it should be like a morale check in BX, right? There's a 2d6 target number. You score 8 or below to stay.
I think that 1E literally kind of turned the post melee morale into the percentile roll. Like if you look at what the factors are in the 1E DMG, I think that there is a sufficient role for post combat in chainmail, for sure.
It is too. If you look at the results for the percentile morale failure in chainmail, like it does have, retreats and things like that.
Yeah, it really it's really close, and it emulates the leader being taken out as well. Even like in Lathan, it's X1 solo. Like in Lathan's Gold, they use that whole mechanism, man. Like if you want to fight with your unit, your army, your ship, then you can fight the battle. But if you want to go solo, once you defeat the leader, the group runs away by default. And so they kind of like extrapolated upon that that concept of the leader being taken out causing failure, and so you have the choice in that module to just kill the combat by getting rid of the leader. But yeah, I think that honestly, I think going forward for myself, I'll probably use the 1E percentile roll in Chainmail.
Yeah, and I'll
Not necessarily the next Chainmail game, but at the table for speed.
Yeah. I've already converted all the troop classes to a 2d6 system with untrained, trained, and well-trained breakdown. Like I did that in Dragons
In Men in
Beyond.
Metal, is that how you did it?
No, Men in Metal is based on WRG, which has its own reaction tests and stuff. The short answer is no. But in Dragons Beyond, I already did the troop class breakout for the 2d6 system. I'd use 2d6 as the mechanism. It's too much trouble to do these 3 steps. It slows it down the fun. It takes all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
It does. It's much easier to just toss a couple dice and be done with it for sure. And I don't see the benefit to doing it the other way. I don't think there's enough benefit to it.
No, I mean, conceptually, I understand, right? Who inflicted the most casualties? Who has the most survivors? How badass are the survivors, right? And are we going to stick around? Factoring all that in the moment. It's something a human brain would do. The lizard brain is programmed to do that calculation like automatically. Trying to do it with math is really painful.
The system you talked about with the 3 different classes, it sounds a lot like the Flames of War to me. Is that something you looked at when you did this, or?
Nope. No, I just knew that, like in Chainmail, you can have elite troops, and similar concept like guards, regiments in Napoleonics, or like a retinue unit in what do you call it, Days of Nights. Anyway, there's usually an elite class, and then there's usually an untrained or like green class too in some rule systems. So I thought untrained, trained, and well-trained, and just
and that's
call
how
it
I
a day.
see Lightfoot, Armored Foot, and Heavy Foot is, Heavy Foot and Armored Foot, Lightfoot. Lightfoot are the untrained troops, and then, blah, blah, blah. Or a lot of the time with my models, I will just go ahead and base it on how it's sculpted and what's modeled on the model. That's why I love Chainmail, man. It's a pickup game for minis. It really is. And I've had a lot of fun using it as a skirmish game. Actually would be interested in running that skirmish with some people running 2 sides of that and running the skirmish, because when you start throwing in twists into those battles and then playing with spell complexity, there's a lot of tactical choice in that skirmish game. It's kind of cool, man.
Chainmail, I think that's the one thing that's valuable is it was a very early, like compared to the British scene that was using WRG and some other stuff, Chainmail hit the sweet spot, and the fantasy thing was completely revolutionary, right? It took the world by storm. Pissed a lot of people off in the historic minis community, and I just think it was the right system at the right time, and picked up on a lot of things that were converging together. It's light enough that somebody can hold most of the rules in their head and get a game out of it,
No, absolutely. You get a couple of charts there, like with spell complexity. It'll run pretty much any magic system, in my opinion. Like runs 1E magic perfectly. I personally like the chance of spell failure and spell delay. I think that the segment delay in 1E really kind of that developed from the spell complexity system, because some of those spells will delay to the next round. And then they will fail if someone's attacked. I think that's what he did. I really can see him taking that spell complexity system and turning into the segment-based combat for spell casting.
Yeah, I do like to talk about the next game. I want to test out the magic system.
Yeah.
I think we're at a level now where we understand all the mundane stuff well enough that tacking on the magic now won't be a bridge too far.
No, I don't think it will. And honestly, it will be interesting to see. And I wonder if it's something like, would you guys prefer to test individual, like pick spells and test those spells and see how they operate, or randomize that? Like, what are your thoughts, man?
I think the randomizing it would be, so I guess you just kind of need to establish what the purpose of this is, right? Like, if we're just like having fun, but you can just make it random or whatever. Or is it like we're trying to test specific ones? Or is it we're just trying to test the system as a whole? If we're trying to test the system as a whole, then we should probably do like a couple small scenarios with random spells in them, would be what I would think. Just to kind of see, right, that, you know, this one it has a couple spells and the next one we all have different spells. Just to kind of get a rough idea of how they, you know, because the infantry only battles, I'm not going to say they're boring. I do actually find them very exciting, but they are very samey, right?
They are the same.
Yeah.
But they are very samey. But I feel like the spells are so different that if we did one with a couple and one with a different couple, I think you're going to get a very different game from it.
Yeah. I think once you start for the infantry battles, I think if you start adding in weather and twists to the battle, then that could kind of change it up and give you a little bit more fun out of the infantry battles. But with just terrain and just straight fight, yeah, it is definitely samey. It pairs really well with Warcry cards, man. I don't know if you've played Warcry from Games Workshop. The game is done every time you start the game. You actually have randomized deployment and twists and objectives based on a deck of cards. So there's 3 decks of cards, and the deployment will actually keep troops on or off the field till X amount of rounds have gone by, and then the twist will change the range that you can actually shoot. The twist will change, you know, how much strength, and the objectives will be anything from like territory capture to like there's a blood mark unit that you have to get rid of, and that's the only way you're going to win the game is by getting rid of that unit or that figure. And so it really does do a great job of making any rule set a little bit more interesting. But I think, yeah, testing the magic first, and then I would like to see how a game goes with all the twists and everything in, and like, okay, like use the full range of it. And potentially test Siege before that as well, because the Siege is interesting to me as well once the magic's in there, because I feel like the wizards are siege engines that are going to make sieges very interesting.
Yeah, we have to.
Now, magic.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think, yeah, definitely getting the magic system mastered first would be a prerequisite before moving on to Siege, because once we go to Siege, we have to do the man-to-man system, and
yes,
and find a way to interleave that with the artillery segment. You know,
well, and also I would say that before Siege, it might need to add in, because I'm not necessarily throwing in fantastical creatures with the magic yet either. So the fantastical creatures, I think, come in at a different level as well to kind of play with. But
you're kind of forced already, because like if you're gonna do random spells or whatever, you have Conjure Elemental, and
that's true.
Yeah.
You know what? That's very interesting that you say that, man. So then that's a good question. Does this mean the next one, are we putting in creatures?
There's actually a few things I want to talk about regarding spells and how we're going to do the next game, because you have 4 spells I see which are going to be a headache if you don't get things sorted out beforehand. If you look at Phantasmal Forces, for example, that already implies to some degree there needs to be an unknowability about the forces.
Yeah.
Or, well, I guess you don't, because you could also try to duplicate one of your own units, but in the kind of battles we're doing, it's basically a tactic you use at the start of a game. If you're going to use it halfway through, unless you do terrain, blocking, line of sight, it becomes very hard to make proper use of the spell.
Creation of the apparition of a unit or creature for 4 turns, max duration, complexity 2. And that's a good question. It also leads me to another question. What I have here is complexity 2 there. For a max of 4 turns, I would read that as there needs to be a complexity roll of 2 every time you do it, but that's a given default.
Yes,
and you need to do something else.
Yeah.
However,
and
if
this
it's
raises.
a seer, there's a -4 on the roll. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so that's interesting. That complexity there is interesting. It raises a question for me.
Yeah, the complexity is interesting, but also the spells themselves, right? So, do we assume that they can cast any spell as long as they don't exceed the maximum number of spells that you can have under control at a time? Is that how you want to roll it, or do you want it to be like a magic user that only has so many spells?
Yeah, I was planning on using, because the complexity chart is just the level of the spell. I mean, that's what it is. So I'm planning on using the 1E DMG, or I can go to OD&D. But I feel like with this spell list, I'm not sure. I think the 3 LBB might work for this. I'm not sure though. I need to cross check it.
It should work, and
Yeah,
if you check the complexity to spell level, they coincide perfectly.
Yeah, that's so. If everything's covered in Men and Magic or whatnot, then that's what I'll use for sure. And so I think I don't see anything that wouldn't be. Is Phantasmal Force in there? I guess it's already got the complexity there, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll stick with this spell list, and we'll stick with it out of 3 LBB if we need clarification. Darkness.
So yeah, Phantasmal Forces is an interesting one. Conjuration of Elementals implies you have the option of having some kind of fantastical beings in there.
Yep.
Moving terrain is interesting because it does require there to be some amount of terrain on the table.
There does. Yeah, let's pivot back to the terrain.
Actually, I love that idea. I love that idea of a unit on a piece of terrain and then a wizard moving it, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, that's freaking amazing. Does it move the unit with it, or does the unit fall off the tower, right? I don't know.
Well, if there's a unit behind the hill, right, and the hill moves out from in front of them.
So point the unit out, or you put it on? No, that's very interesting. That is an amazing...
Yeah, but
this was actually a degenerate tactic in War Master Revolutions where Wood Elves were able to bring more forests onto the table as part of their deployment. Mm-hmm. But they were also able to move forests, and they fought better in forests than others did. So what a good tactic for them was basically make a moving siege fortress or forest moving with the army.
You know what would be amazing in OD&D is actually bringing forest along with lycanthropes, man.
Well, yeah,
they double their
the lycanthropes on the
attack.
The lycanthropes on one side and the ints on the other side. That way, both of them are.
That would be very amazing, because like if you could bring a forest in onto those lycanthropes, man, when they're in combat, they're double hitting. It's crazy, man.
Yeah,
they're terrifying.
So terrain.
Okay,
let's talk about terrain for a second. So the default rule is you can have up to 8 pieces of terrain. I mean, some of those are blanks, but still, that could be a crowded battlefield. I don't know. We just used 2 pieces in this last game, and you saw how much of a change it made to the situation. I think 8 might be a little bit too ambitious. I don't know.
Yeah.
How? I don't know off the top of my head. How big do they suggest terrain pieces are?
Either 1 foot by either 12 inches on a side or 2 foot on a side. But then again, they were using a real sand table in Gary's basement.
I might do this with miniatures and actual. I might do it at 28 millimeter. I have to decide if I'm going to take the time to do that or not. I think I can do it at 28 millimeter. I think I have the right miniatures for it, but I gotta look at a couple things. I would enjoy doing it with actual terrain if I can, but we might go back to cubes depending on what goes on. But I'll have to think about it. I'm going on a cruise, and I'll sit in Jamaica and think about it for a little bit.
Boz had a point. What were you saying, Boz?
Go ahead, Boz.
I was going to cross-check something because I have this book I've borrowed from a friend, which talks about what is the proper amount of terrain for different kinds of games. I just need to re-find which section it was in.
Yeah, you might have posted that. Did you post about how, like a more tactical, like a squad leader kind of game, you want a lot of scattered terrain for cover for infantry?
Yeah, they talk up to, I think, 30 to 40% of the table covered in terrain.
Yeah, you posted
While
that
you're
somewhere.
looking that up, with Polymorph, I need to reread Wizards, but it talks about it lasts until it's countered, or the user changes himself back, you know? Do you guys remember reading anything about counter spells, or are we looking at that as like if the wizard knows the spell, they can counter it? Like, what is your thought there?
Just it negates it. It's yeah. I wouldn't treat it like Dispel Magic. It predates Dispel Magic, so
Right.
treat it like a chainmail thing.
Well, that's what I'm looking for in Chainmail. Do you know if there's any sort of countering at all? Because I don't remember it.
There is, yeah. The counter spell can
There
be
is
done.
counter?
Yeah.
All right, I'll find it.
Yeah, on the die score of 7 or better.
Is that what it is?
With the minus from lower level wizards added up.
Right.
It's on the bottom of page 28. I found it. For rank and flank file games, they talk about 10 to 20% of the table covered by terrain to still be properly playable.
I think I play with more than that regularly.
It's also in my experience very dependent on the sizes of units.
Well, if it's skirmish and if it was man to man, I would definitely stick that terrain. How many? I was reading when you said that. How many pieces did it say?
Rod talked about 8 pieces, I think.
Yeah,
What
chainmail.
did your book say?
Chainmail is crazy. It gives you 8.
But what did that book that you were looking at both say?
For a skirmish style, up to 40% of the table covered in terrain.
Yeah, that's probably normally what I'm a lot more towards. 30-40% is how we play it. So quite a bit of it.
Well, I think also 8 pieces, 12 inches is pretty big for a piece of terrain, though. and 24 inches is pretty big. 8 pieces of 24-inch terrain is a lot.
It's a table.
That's a lot of terrain.
Tables, yeah.
That's a lot of terrain, man.
Is it from the first page of the second edition you read that, Rod?
I'm looking right now on page 5 of the 3rd edition. It says 2 foot by 2 foot pieces of masonite. So it says 2 by 2. I'm sure I saw somewhere in here 1 by 1 as well. Maybe I'm imagining it.
A more advanced method to construct the trees and houses set into the soft modeling compound.
There is an argument to be made that they talk less about actual terrain size here and more about how do you model a table, and they say make 2 by 2 foot pieces of terrain which you can swap out as needed. But
Yeah.
I think if there's 6-inch pieces, then maybe 8 is acceptable.
Yeah. I don't think you want a 2 foot by 2 foot terrain piece on ours.
no.
I mean, there's also
So, like-
assuming the whole piece takes up the whole 2 feet, right? It could be a 2-foot piece that you draw the thing on. You know what I'm saying? So then it might be like more like a foot by a foot is the actual thing on it, and the rest of it's to bury with sand or something like that.
Oh, look.
Let's see.
I can see 8 pieces working out on this table if we went for
Actually,
size.
on page 6 of my second edition, I can also draw. It talks about terrain selection. And they say, on a number of 3 by 5 index cards, draw the following. 2 with rivers, 1 with marsh, 1 with pond, 1 with gully, 2 with woods, 1 with rough grounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how we do it most of the time. I have 15 millimeter miniatures, and we just use index cards, and we probably have at least 10 of them on the table at a time.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, we do. So it's just typically almost always a river and a pond, and then trees, and then we add, ditches or hills or something else to it also. It's
Yep.
typical.
Yeah, my concern is my 2 concerns with it are A, it's going to add to the complexity of like fire and maneuver,
It
and
does.
and B, it's kind of a knock-on effect. It's going to reduce the focus of the game on figuring out the magic stuff.
Yeah, I'm almost. It also the thing that I'm worried about are the missile segment and the fireballs and lightning, especially if there's terrain for those wizards to get on top of. to have
Steve.
a 360 view of the battlefield with no spell complexity and a fireball that will destroy every unit it touches. That might add a little bit too much power to them for the first one. It's like going
It
to
is.
siege almost.
It is.
Man. So I think we'll probably keep it for the next one for the magic. The first one at least. I don't know if I'm going to do much line of sight blocking. Maybe just some movement stopping, just so that there's some that cavalry can't run over the wizard right away. Make him cross the
Right.
border. What's that?
Don't
We
forget.
also didn't have like
Don't forget he can be invisible too. So
Yeah, that's true. He can turn invisible until someone gets near.
That's actually a very good point, because at that point where the format we've been using starts breaking down, right? Between that and the invisibility spell, you
So the way
already
I've
have.
done invisibility in the games that I run here, I have essentially you're placing the wizard, and then before the start of the first turn, you can remove it and write down the location of the wizard. That's infiltration. With the wizard, I think that I'll do something similar where they can move along the lines in the deployment room and be placed and just written down as an order where that wizard is if people want to use invisibility. Unless someone has a different method.
Thinking about what you see in a lot of Greek Spiel games where they basically don't send an image of the entire table, but often make sub-selection of this is what your units can see. Either done in Tabletop Simulator with 3 literal tables next to each other, each for one for the referee, one for one team, and one for the other. But I've also seen Java, for example, who is, I think, in the server now, use a map where he basically, with something like GIMP or Photoshop, edits out certain sections and sends a screenshot of those to the players in question.
Yeah, that's essentially what will happen. It's if even because we don't need to do it live like I was talking about, but yeah.
It's an interesting point, though. It might be worth also running a game with a more densely populated table, and maybe also including in that actual line of sight and what could your
It's fun.
actually see.
Hobbits are a lot of fun. What's up, man? Hobbits are a lot of fun with their infiltration stuff, man.
we've been mostly talking about the next game.
Yeah, I've been on for a couple minutes. I was trying to figure out how to put my camera on, and what was behind me. Make sure nothing weird was behind me.
So I think you're right, though. I think that terrain and we need to have at least a couple things that someone can move. Maybe we'll craft. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 2 wizards per side. When there's 12, how many spells are there in the actual book? There are
8.
There's 8 spells, is what they list.
8 plus
Plus the innate,
2 missile spells.
yeah, the innate abilities. Yeah.
Well, no, there's 16 listed.
Are you talking about Chainmail or?
Yeah, Chainmail. There's 16 in Chainmail, 3rd edition. Yeah. So we have
2nd edition.
We have Phantasmal Forces, Darkness, Wizard Light. I don't know if we'll need any of this, but we'll see. It depends on if there's twist in there or darkness. Detection, Concealment, Conjuration of an Elemental, Moving Terrain, Protection from Evil, Levitate, Slowness, Haste, Polymorph, Confusion, Hallucinatory Terrain, Cloud Kill, which if they control it, is gonna wipe out everybody. And Anti-Magic Shell. Yeah, so there's 16.
Right. They must have altered the list from 2nd edition then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Protection from evil is also going to be an interesting one. Are we going to include that, or?
I think it's a brutal one. I mean, I'm willing to keep it in there. It has to be, the upkeep has to be there, and there is a possibility of failure. Maybe giving that to a seer like having a wizard on there and having a seer on there. And the seer can be a walking shield. But yeah, I mean, I'll think about it. You guys think about it too.
It might be worth thinking about that if you
What's
do. If you do use the spell, it might be worth thinking about having a actual good and evil side predetermined.
Well, I'll just call
Play.
chaos evil for these purposes,
Yeah.
or just the French.
Yeah.
Now, are we thinking about using the same force list again, or changing it up?
The forces.
Like, are we going to use the same army list and then just stack on a wizard on top of the three
I
heroes?
might go to your
and,
list and get the. I don't know. Do we want gunpowder in there at the same time or not? No, I was thinking get gunpowder out for this.
Mhm.
So go back to the original list potentially that you ran.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
either that.
I don't. The. I mean, I'm not against stacking magic on top of gunpowder. In fact,
It
if
could-
I were
It could be
if
cool.
I were going to make a list of my own, I might bring arquebuss, but I wouldn't bring cannons. There's no. I mean, it depends on the scenario, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of
Doing
thinking maybe.
a battle.
Yeah.
The cannons, kind of worthless in a where you need to march across the field at each other. If you're doing a set piece kind of battle, cannons would be more interesting.
Yeah, the wizards
Yeah, but-
having the spells, either fireball or lightning bolt is going to be enough excitement.
Yeah. Before you
Yeah,
command
and
Steve.
I mean that's your cannon.
I don't know. I'm just
Right,
looking at
fine.
levitate, and some of these spells can be manipulated pretty nicely, man.
Yeah, I think just having the spells is going to be enough of a headache to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, especially if I'm going to
Yeah,
levitate
yeah,
them up
yeah,
in the air and
yeah.
drop you.
I mean, it's for the referee because I mean, Rodney can attest that there is even when the other people are doing the orders, there's still a lot of cognitive load in executing all the orders,
Yeah.
Yes.
and it's really easy to miss things like, oh, I forgot this +1, or oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of myself for catching the standing cavalry rule in the last couple turns there. That was a really edge
That is a
case.
cool. Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah.
All the edge cases come out too when you referee the game. You'll
Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah.
Well, I
nothing but
think
edge
what we
cases.
should do. Should we try to cycle through all those spells, and try to get them all in, or do we want to actually select some stuff to test?
I think it would be very interesting to have all spells in play potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of manipulation
yeah.
to be dealt with these spells.
You could write the spells down on 16 slips of paper and then just sort them into 4 piles. And then each side and then just assign each pile to each wizard randomly.
I think what we'll do, because we can get 6. We can get 6 spells for wizards, 6 to 7. I'm thinking we'll just go with 6, and then we might just run two wizards, and then run and then run a magician or something on each side as well, so that there's 2 on each side. Is what I'm looking at. That we might run 2 magic users and see what happens.
Oh wow. That would be a lot.
If I were you, I would actually limit it to magicians or warlocks for the first game.
Then we'll need to go. Then we need to go to. What we'll do is we'll go with warlocks, and we'll go with 2 warlocks per side.
Because like with wizards have unlimited range on their spells.
The other
you don't want
wizards are
that.
pretty dang long too, though. They're not shabby. I think the spear is 36 inches, if I'm not mistaken. No, 24.
Magician is 46.
Yeah,
sorry.
warlock is 48.
I'm gonna grab third edition because there's too many differences for me to.
So warlock is a 48-inch range. Magician's 36, and seer is 24. Let me see the target numbers.
A warlock already outranges the best missile troops by a factor of 2.
Yeah, don't do a wizard. Unlimited range is huge problem.
I was actually looking at it the other day, and I was like, this is actually insane, because it becomes a battle of kill the other wizard as soon as possible, and afterwards you just have free reign to fireball from wherever you want to.
Well, I mean, if the wizard is the army commander, then that puts that, it's basically a blood marked game. I mean, like I was talking about Twist, but at that point you're just going after the wizard, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so we'll do heroes, superheroes, probably, with two warlocks. I want to try to hit every spell. So I think 2 warlocks aside will allow us to field every spell. Yeah. Honestly, the spell complexity, I think the roll is freaking weird the way they have the target numbers, because they have delay, fail, this, and there's gaps. And I'm like, okay, what the hell is this gap in here? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of silly, to be honest. Like, there doesn't need to be 3 numbers there. But it is what it is.
I like it.
That's
It's
why
quirky. It's quirky, but not a horribly
I
quirky.
played one 2 years ago, so I'm looking forward to watching how this works.
Yep. Agree.
What I have found is in with man-to-man, and if you do not deploy properly and you do not move your figures properly, like you're not getting your magic off, man. There's definitely some fun tactics to the chainmail spell complexity. I really enjoy it, but it reminds me of the psychic phase in like Warhammer and everything, like the magic phase and all that. So, anything about this last game else that because you weren't here when we were talking about it, brother? Did you have anything you want to bring up about that last game?
Did you guys see my video?
I did.
Did not.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have my notes up here. I think we made a couple of very small mistakes, but I think that overall, the post melee morale using just the people involved in the combat, I think that worked really well, much better than the last game. It was more gamey. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Less ping pong, which I think is the right way to say it. I think it was Rodney said that it was less ping pong. I think that perfectly says it. That some of these big games, especially if you watch, I think Bandits Keep and Joy Wargaming are pretty much the only other 2 people on YouTube, and both of them did that a few times, where you saw like the armies ran up and one ran away, and it was like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Like there was 5,000 orcs there.
Right.
Yeah.
They just ran
Right.
one dude. What's going on?
They're using such small units. They're only using, like Joy Wargaming, he puts 4 units on one base. So he might have 20 figures on 5 bases, because he's doing some sort of a 2mm approximation. But everyone is using all these tiny little forces, where they have 6 or 7 units total in the game, 3 or 4 on each side, and then each unit is only maybe 30 tops. Or with John, he'll do 5 bases that count as 100 men. So he's got 500 men in one unit. But he's only counting that as 20 bases. So these games that we did are the first time I've ever seen anyone play with 40 bases or 50 bases.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can play it. I mean, that was a 1,500 point game, legit.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was someone on the Clerics War Ringwell Discord ask, I think it was, God, I can't remember who it was, but he was asking how long games took with certain point counts.
That was Alchemic Raker. Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I think the 1,200 point game was about 3 hours.
Yeah.
I had a private chat with him. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't play with points because I don't care. More about whatever the scenario brings. And I, even back in the day when I played Warhammer Fantasy, we would pick a scenario and then pick units that would be cool for that scenario and then just play it. It didn't matter what the points were because we were going for objectives. And even if you lost the battle, you know, points wise or whatever, you could, if you could still achieve your objective. And maybe your objective was just to not have all your guys die in 5 turns. You know, if you could hold off the bad guys for 5 turns, you win. You know, even though, you know, you've got 4.
There's one dude left. Yeah.
Yeah.
4 spearmen and a hero left, and that's all you got. I won the game. I was held you off for 5 turns. Because that's fun to me. That's what I like as a narrative game that makes. I hate one-offs. I hate them.
Well, it's not like we're gonna find a competitive scene for Chainmail. I mean, you don't need point balancing for it. You know,
Right.
to some extent, running it in a dungeon and populating a map with it, you want to have an idea of what the forces are, maybe. But
Sure.
that doesn't. But for a game like that, honestly, it's not Warhammer, and it doesn't have a competitive scene, so it doesn't really need it.
No. But also, the only way I would use points is if I was going to be like keying a dungeon or keying an area. You know, like the way Tannisborg is set up, or the original setup was. You know, this is room 5, and it's got 75 points of goblins in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually had a really good. I did a game with your protection point method, Rod, of Warhammer, 40K.
Oh, really?
And I populated a dungeon crawl, and I did the encounters with your protection point method, and it worked out very well.
That's good.
It worked very, very well.
It's not mine. It's Arneson's. I mean, Arneson
No, I
says
know
he did
it.
one thing, and I
You
reverse
modified
engineered
it.
what he actually did. So,
He kind of broke it, though. He didn't clarify it.
yeah. Go ahead, Stephen.
Because I haven't read yet at all. I have the PDF. I haven't looked at it. But I have somebody printing off a copy for me, so I'll be able to look at it soon.
I'm looking forward to playing a map campaign with it. I honestly think it will play very well after going through it. And it seems like it builds the traditional original game as a setting too, is what it feels like.
Well,
I just want to run into a bunch
it
of
is.
big ass elephants, bro. I love the elephant entry in the book.
Yeah. Good luck with it. Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a Dragons Beyond commercial.
No, it was good. It's I actually found someone in the wild that had bought it and played it, and they were like really excited about it. I posted about it in this thread on Reddit, and they came back in and they're like, "Yeah, man, the magic and the armor and the spell failure based upon armor, like they had a lot of good things to say about playing with the system." So that was cool to find.
All I did was try to be as faithful as possible to that 73 playtest, and then fill in the gaps with OD&D and Chainmail, and merge all that stuff together, and try not to pull in as much AD&D and BX. You know, try not to poison it with
the
that
experience
stuff.
of playing different things, and it can really muddy up the waters. You know.
Yep.
That's all you do? Just that? That's all?
That's all.
How long?
He keeps breaking up a little.
Yeah, your mic keeps cutting out on you a bit.
How long did that take you to put together?
Oh my gosh. A couple months. I really started to feel the pressure of like the 50th anniversary, so I wanted to get cranked out by December. But like I started playtesting it with Dio and some other guys on this OD&D Discord, and we were just doing sessions playing the 73 rules, and every week I would type up a little bit more about here's how to do the characters, here's how to do the combat, and then finally I'm like, F it, I'm going to write a 0 edition clone, you know? So, and then I cranked on it for a couple months at like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it turned out well. It's like 300 pages, isn't it?
Yeah, 320 with the index. Yeah, that's just a tiny thing. Back to like the initial deployment, I do have a question. So because of my F up using the centimeter scale instead of the 1.5 centimeter scale, it did make the table much longer, right? I heard that loud and clear and kind of figured that out by turn 2 that we were in for a little bit of a slog. But the delayed deployment, I like that as an idea. Are we keeping that for the next game? Having one side with a delayed deployment?
Yeah, actually, I think what I will do is I will draw a random card for the delayed deployment, and a third of the units, depending on what the card says, will be withheld for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
And what I might do is I might have you guys group up the force that you have into 3 different groups, and we'll call them hammer, dagger, and shield. And you assign a hammer, a dagger, and shield to each group, and then the deployment cards will actually either put all of them on, or hold back 2, or hold back 1, or stagger it over multiple rounds. It just I also did really like the way that you gave us the choice on when to bring them in. That was actually solid. So I think I might randomize, but either way, I think we will delay some of it. Hopefully that it delays a wizard for a little while, the one with Cloud Kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, I want to see the wizard with Cloud Kill die, so that Cloud Kill goes crazy on the battlefield by itself, man.
Or an elemental. I want to see a crazy elemental. Yeah.
That would be fun. And so on that note, again, I think I am super tempted. We're going to have to do, I think you're right, fantastic creatures need to be in there because of that spell. So I might pick a couple things that are going to go on the table. Actually, I might just decide that I want to be mean and grab a dragon and play it myself and fly it over you guys. So we'll see.
No, you got to do a dragon up top and a purple worm coming up from the bottom every once in a while.
There you go. Yeah.
This is why, but seriously, like I am super tempted to play 28 millimeters so I can pull out all the Lord of the Rings crap and throw down the OD&D miniatures and roll with it. I think I do have the 28 millimeter to play it.
So the delayed deployment, I have a question for historical accuracy. That was a legitimate problem with the Roman legions, right? Because they would march where they would all their infantry would be here, and then all their horses would be behind them, or something like that, right? So if they ran into a battle before they meant to, it was literally just only one type of troop, for that quarter mile. So when they had to delay deploy, it was actually all the infantry's here, but none of the archers are here. And then none of the horses were here. Because they wouldn't line up, modern times, you line up in formations. Is that correct?
Go for it.
It was even worse because especially if we're talking Romans, we're talking legion plus socii being roughly 30 to 40,000 men. This would be a column which was at least 15 kilometers long. If you added a counter battle and you ambushed it, for example, it happened in Teutoburg, I think, in the forest, the barbarians just were able to cut them down piece by piece because the reinforcements couldn't come in fast enough.
Yeah, it was definitely a problem. I mean, the Romans were sophisticated enough to have spies and to have to hire local guides and to send out cavalry and things like that and have an advance. They had a concept of military operations, whereas other people in the medieval and dark ages, not so much. So it was it's not like the movies, right? People don't just line up on the battlefield and go at it. Piecemeal deployment happens all the time.
Right.
I mean, actual lineup also happened because you would see armies basically offer a battle in conditions they thought were favorable to them. Because 2 armies close to each other couldn't forage from the countryside, so they would be on a ticking timer effectively.
An interview with someone else on YouTube, the guy was talking about terrain for battles, and he was saying that the way he wanted to do it was basically that the commanders could pick the terrain that was on the battlefield. And you're well, isn't that not realistic? It's no, that is realistic, right? Because the better general would know which terrain they wanted to use on, right? So it shouldn't be quote random. That it would be a useful tool to say that the general can pick it.
That's how my trade card system works. If you have there's a scouting mini game that I have set up for my Imaginations campaign, and so each player has their scouts doing scouting thing, and it's a card game. It's really easy. That I designed it for solo play, but basically the winner, depending on how much you win by, determines your advantage in terms of the terrain, placing the terrain, and choosing the terrain. So that's exactly the point that I was trying to simulate.
We would probably deploy with something like this, and that's why I want the question. Are you okay deploying in the center of the battlefield? If we set up something that's already ready to go into the action, It would be randomized based upon unit, like you wouldn't know ahead of time what's going to be where. We could also draw something where, and I can take some of this stuff out, but like in this case, like I can see that like potentially if a wizard ends up in the center of that, and then the rest of this comes on in different rounds. Like what you have here is you actually only have one unit on in this card until the second round. Well, there's 2 units for each one, and then it's delayed over the next 2 rounds. Like, how far do you want to go with something like that? Are you okay starting within half the battlefield? Like, if it deploys that way, randomization, or what?
Are you gonna put a tower there?
Ooh, a lone wizard in his tower.
We want to do siege,
Ooh.
but I think we're gonna do siege. Like something like that would be solid. I think, right? Like even if we decided, let's throw down 2 wizards and then have 2 wizards come on after, right? Or randomize those units could be interesting, right? End up with a unit next to a cavalry, or a wizard next to a cavalry unit in the center of the battlefield. I do like the idea of a tower, but I think that 360 degree for the missiles might be pretty brutal. I'm open for whatever, though, honestly.
Well, it wouldn't be 360 for archers, but it'd be 360 for skirmishers because those have different rules. But what I was thinking is if it's tower, you could get out the old D&D book and roll up the wizard, the evil wizard's companions or whatever, and find out what monster you want. Fantastic creatures. That's where you act.
That's actually not a bad idea. That's interesting. Using that and rolling it off of there.
Yeah, I like that. Keep it very OD&D style.
Work.
Yeah.
I've got a tower right back there. That could work.
Fog of War, so those monsters can be kept and they can be introduced to the battlefield, at the evil player's discretion.
I think, and then on that note, if we're going to go that direction, what I might use the same winner benefits that Rod used for this game, but there's 2 people that won. Instead of like with me, it was just me, so it didn't cross team. So I might pull off. I'll look at something, but we'll try to give some benefit to the teams that have the winners on them to some extent. But yeah, we want a standard objective, or do you want me to do a randomized objective?
You could do 6 objectives where the good side and the evil side each have a overall objective, and then give a subsidiary objective to each general.
So this says the players roll off. The winner chooses who is the attacker and who is the defender. Yada yada yada. That's defender places 1 treasure token on the battlefield within 6 inches of the center. At the end of the 3rd battle round, if the treasure token is carried by one of the defender's fighters, the defender wins the battle. Otherwise, the attacker wins the battle. That kind of thing. Or yeah, we could draw a couple. I could give you guys some randomized stuff. But am I making it too much cognitive load for me? I don't know. We'll see.
You may.
But
You might be. Yeah.
There was a lot of low-key swearing in some of those turns. I was watching one of the reports, and my sister-in-law was listening, and she's like, wow, he is sighing a lot. And I was like, hey, he did this to himself. Like,
right.
You didn't tell him to do any of this.
I edited out some of the sighing. It was it was bad.
Bless America.
God bless America. Land
like
of the...
these twists could be fun, man. Like there's one. This is a solid one. Once there's a wounded unit, they're stepping up their fighting capability. There's a bunch of stuff in here that I enjoy playing with. But each fighter finishes. If you're within a terrain feature, then take damage on the terrain feature type of thing. Like I don't know. I'll think about it. If you guys are good with it, I might set something up that randomizes it. No, I want the move terrain. The tower would be great because the move terrain spell could kill everything on that tower. That could be amazing.
Oh wow! Yeah, that could be a game ender right there.
Levitate whatever's there and drop it. Either crush something or drop a unit. That's good.
Yeah, I think the magic is going to be very interesting, and you're going to have to be very creative as a referee to figure out how it should actually work.
We will use the missile So Fireball and Lightning will go in the Missile segment, and they do not have a spell complexity roll. So that is, I think that right there is how brutal they are. That's the brutal piece of this, that they can cast that every turn. So you get on a tower and you call those distances properly, it could be over really quickly.
Calling distances is something that's going to be hard to get during the orders phase. Just
Yeah.
be aware your players aren't going to cooperate.
Yeah, I believe it.
Right under that bus. That's all right.
And then we'll probably start like in July, I would think. And if you guys want to run it before that while I'm gone, feel free to. I'm all for anyone else taking the referee position here if you want to. But I will be back. I promise I'm not hiding.
Moving back around to the game, how did you guys find the gunpowder weaponry?
I loved the arquebuses when they wiped out that entire skirmisher unit. That was fun.
Yeah.
I liked rolling that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that it's interesting. I think that it's actually super powerful. I think that deployment. If I had noticed the farm was backwards for what I wanted to have happen before the sixth turn or something like that when we retreated.
Yeah, I thought it was backwards. I was like, weren't they going to put all their guns? They put all your guns right next to it. And
I didn't even think about it. And I'm like, that's where we started really doing things wrong, was when we decided to walk away. That was bad. It was very French of us. So
Yeah, turning the guns around was not the best maneuver. I'm sorry.
Well, then we forgot the cannons were turned around for like 2 turns. I'm like, can I fire? You go. Rod goes, well, they're facing your baggage train. That was pretty fun. That was good.
Yeah, we joked about in the red chat about that.
Because one thing I didn't realize.
You go ahead.
One thing I didn't realize until we actually started the game is how relatively short the range on arquebusiers is. And that's what really threw me for a loop, for example.
Well, and I looked at the fact that they had pikemen, and I'm like, I didn't take time enough to even set up the force, to be honest. It was like the last minute I was talking about us, and we just kind of threw some equipment on them, and really honestly should have looked at it and set the units up a little bit differently. But it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely the pikemen. Yeah, we didn't do Lands Connect, which get even more like overpowered bonuses for having the pikes. It'd be interesting to play a unit of Lands Connect sometime.
The infantry or the horse just going and falling down to that in like round 2 or 3 or whatever that was. Is just like, I was like, this is jacked, dude. We're in trouble, dude. All I wanted to do was get behind your lines and start looking for your freaking baggage train, dude. Like, that's what I wanted to do over there, and no. I looked the next day and there's like a single freaking figure there. I'm like, oh, this didn't go well, did it?
the composite bows. I mean, those are really overpowered. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny.
Because the battlefield, you couldn't get around them. They covered the entire that side of the river with their fire. You could have potentially got in an angle while they were still in column, but once he deployed in a line, you were effed pretty badly.
Once they get out there, it's brutal.
Yeah.
And that was a big, I wouldn't say gamble, but that was a discussion between us at the beginning. Was like, do we kind of go all heavy armored on the archers, right? And maybe go more crossbows, or go with the super light, no armor and composite bows. And honestly, I didn't do the math. Think about it. We just kind of picked one, or at least I just kind of picked one. But I feel like that could have gone horribly wrong. I didn't actually look at the math and be like, oh, well, maybe if all your dudes were armored, then we would have done no damage to all of them, right? And then our mobility would have meant nothing. But the numbers definitely worked out. The no armor skirmishers,
Well,
just the mobility and range.
If somebody would have been able to place some missile fire on you guys, then the unarmored would have been. You might not have liked that trade-off as much.
Right.
Yeah, but
put those guys on the other side of the river because number one, no one could melee them.
Yep.
And then number two, they were supported by arquebusiers and heavy crossbows.
Yep.
So those units marching up the river were essentially invincible. I mean, once the horsemen got slaughtered, the heavy foot got slaughtered, because once those archers, the composite archers on the other side of the river, once they were in range of the heavy foot, they were taking out 4 guys every turn, as you trud along, at 9 inches. And so I had 3 turns, so that's 12 guys gone out of 50. All of a sudden you're getting in route, excess casualty range.
Yeah, we probably should have looked at that and denied the flank and go all lefts past the farm.
Yeah.
Probably.
But frankly, at that point, after losing the medium horse, we were already at a massive disadvantage there.
Yep. It got to the point where we were like, okay, you gonna make the orders real quick, dude?
Yeah. Yeah, you demoralized the enemy commanders there. Good job, Lieutenant. You did.
Yeah.
I think we did a refused flank to the west on both sides, and so that that skewed the battle in a strange way.
It was interesting. It was good.
Yeah, and I've softened on my criticism there, Purple Druid, after listening to your video. I still have my criticism about moving forward at the 6-inch pace because you are somewhat limiting you're limiting the maneuverability of a few of your units, like the heavy foot. But whatever, you guys won. It was a blowout win, so I don't think I can criticize too much, right?
You did it all wrong.
You won, but not that way. That's not how you should have won.
Yeah.
Not like that. Yeah, well, once I saw that we were doing this, I'm like, oh man, we're playing down the length of a regular table. I was like, oh god, this is gonna take. We got to slow it down and see what happens. Because what I was hoping that the other side, the red side, would decide to get aggressive and charge at us with only half of their forces because the rest of them just couldn't keep up. And so they would split into 2 waves and then we could defeat them in detail.
Yep. Oh, speaking of armored foot, so having played enough scenarios with those boat anchors, as I think we should call them, it might be better to just have them as heavy horse initially and let them convert at the player's option into armored foot if they have some reason for doing so.
Yeah. Yep.
You mean like
I agree. I also think deployment randomization and starting that stuff a little bit closer, depending on randomization, will help them a little bit too. And when it comes to like siege battles, things like that, there's some things to do there. But yeah, for sure, I think having them mounted is probably a good idea.
Yeah, my question is, if you have them mounted, is there any reason to dismount them?
Yeah, the referee could say that this patch of ground, you suddenly have stumbled into a patch of ground where the horse is impenetrable, the horses or potholes have been dug here, or something.
This longbowmen with their spikes, man. I still want to see longbowmen set their spikes in the game. I haven't seen that yet, so.
But I do agree with your assessment that the 6 inches is a massive disadvantage.
Yeah.
Like, they need to be anchored on something and not really have to move more than 2 turns
for
or so.
objective-based play, they have a huge piece, especially if you're going point by point when it comes to objective capture. Like, they would be my backline sitting on my backline objective to ensure that they're not shifted off. I mean, they're a freaking tank for sure when it comes to objective capture. Because they don't put in, but the only way, like with this game, if I did objective capture, it'd be point based. For me, I think I would use point based to do. Like, what are your thoughts there on objective capture in the game?
Yeah.
I like objective. If there's like two ways to look at objective capture. One is you choose the objectives first, and then you build your force around how to achieve your objective. That's one way to look at it. The other is, if you're in a campaign situation, then you have to, dance with who brung you. But, like for instance, if there were an objective situation where I needed to, the win condition was sacking the enemy's camp, and you had to put the camp on the board, then I would take armored foot and I would stick them on the camp and leave them there, and then go with the rest of my force, my thing.
Yeah, the point value of the unit or of the base is in the objective is how I would actually judge and rule the capture. So,
And then I would probably take 4, but then, you know what I mean? I might take 20 or 25 and put them. Actually, I'd probably take 24. I would do 8x3, and that way, that would be a stubborn enough unit that by the time someone got back there, they might be weakened enough that 25 stands of armored infantry would be able to resist most anything, especially if they had a small missile unit next to them, like 6 or 8 guys.
yeah, I'm envisioning it more, and also along the lines of a single one-offer test. It's having a backline objective for each force as like the baggage trade, but it's on the table, and then some forward objectives. So you're and then this victory point based on capture at the end of the round or the beginning of the next round.
Yeah, because if we knew where the objective was, then we could go. You know what I mean? That changes the battle too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen the baggage. This isn't a campaign game. I just want to not die, and so seeking out the baggage didn't seem like it was worth the squeeze.
No.
See, I for some reason I read it that the baggage was worth more, and that's why I wanted the horse to go and flank you and get behind you guys and go look for the baggage. I don't know. Both pointed out like on turn 3 or 4 or something like that. Like, dude, it's just not worth that many points. And I read it again and I'm like, oh, you're right. It's not worth that many points.
It was worth a lot of points still, but it was also way too dangerous, I think, with how densely packed the table was to go for it early.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's
Yeah.
definitely light horse is much better at that mission, and there was no light horse.
Yeah.
And the scale would be different, right? So like we play on my kitchen table, light horse can go almost all the way across the table the short way, the way we play it. And that sounds kind of crazy, but it changes the dynamic a lot when like this horse can like suddenly be way over there.
That's one thing I still struggle at with War Master Revolution, for example. A horse there can theoretically move up to 90 centimeters in a single turn and charge something. They have 30 centimeter move, and theoretically you can pull off 3 moves in a turn. And they play on 6x4 foot tables, so you can basically charge all the way across the table if needed, and you have a bit of luck.
That's with orders.
Yeah, it's with the order system there, yeah.
Dude, I love that system.
Yep. And guys, we've been going at it for 90 minutes. What else do we need to cover?
Yeah, that sounds cool. So let's start in July, right?
Yeah.
And Artem the host. And so we can still communicate on Discord about the details of setting it up. But I like the idea of an evil wizard's tower in the middle with some monsters in it. And then
Do it.
Yep.
Artems, why don't you draw some random objectives for us, and then choose blind points. So, the evil wizard in the middle has X points and the good wizard has Y points, and then we choose our forces based on the objectives.
Yep. We'll assign, Brigadine wants to play. You want to invite him in here?
Yeah, I'll bring Brigadine in, absolutely.
Great night. I got to run.
thanks again for everything. This season of games has been super fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one.